And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 68th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound early over the weekend right before Christmas, where I am your host, Noah Freeman, and here with me tonight are my now usual co-hosts, Matthew Lukens and Nithin Christian. If you want to see us live and participate in the ongoing chat, catch us Tuesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. on our YouTube page or our website. If you miss us for the live broadcast, you can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platform you listen to podcasts, so you can listen on your own time. Check out our Twitter and Facebook at The Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ and subscribe. All of our information is in our website, indianahq.com. All right, Hoosier Nation, it is time for some sports talk. On the docket for tonight, it is our very first Reader Mailbag episode where you, the audience members, submitted your questions to us about anything IU sports related, and we will answer them on this more festive episode. But first, of course, as always, Matt, what is your memorable monologue for this week in IU sports?
Well, originally, so I wasn't on the podcast last week, so originally my monologue was going to be about football recruiting and, just the overall state of Indiana athletics. But then Juwan Morgan goes out last night and gets the second ever triple-double in the history of IU basketball. So now that has to be my banner moment. But then, no, wait a second. We go on, and later in the night, Thomas Bryant for the Wizards goes 14 of 14 from the field, a career-high 31 points, and propels the Wizards on to victory over the Suns, which victory over the Suns isn't that big of a deal. But anyways, his career high is pretty big of a deal, and 14 of 14 from the field is pretty big of a deal. Last person to do that was Wilt Chamberlain, so that's pretty good company to be in, one. And two, between Juwan Morgan and Thomas Bryant last night, they were 19 of 19 from the field. So a pretty perfect night from two of the forwards from one of the best and probably most underrated of Tom Crean's recruiting classes here at IU. And so, yeah, we talked about, or the guys talked about last week about Hoosiers and the pros, but I thought I'd give both of those great players a shout out tonight for, historic nights and fantastic nights for the both of them. And so that's my memorable monologue / moment. For over last night, because watching Juwan get the first triple double, we were all like, I think he got to like the 6-7-6 mark, and we're all kind of like in our Slack group chat, kind of like, can he do it? ? Because like this is working out really well, and he got to 10 assists, and we're like, all right, now he has to get a bucket, and then that inbounds play happened, and everybody was like, woohoo, yay! And it was nice to see him get some history here at IU because he's one of the better players to play at IU, definitely. And he's going to go down as a top 50 player of all time at IU, surely. But then I thought that was it for the night. And then Thomas Bryant, shows up. And I'm sure Noah can talk about this a little bit more since he's a diehard Wizards fan. But that was really surprising. So just a great night all around for some of our IU basketball stars.
Yeah, exactly. And first, like you said, the on any given week for any IU sports podcast at all, just Juwan's triple-double being only the second triple-double in Indiana history would have been the main topic. But then you just, like you said, Matt, have Thomas Bryant just coming in and almost even taking the spotlight for
right.
For IU basketball fans, but a couple nice little stats for both of those things. Andy Graham on Twitter posted this right after the game, that for those of you that are into mathematical symmetry, so Juwan Morgan's 10, 10, and 10 triple-double stat line adds up to 30. He played a total of 30 minutes. His plus-minus ratio was plus 30, and the Hoosiers won by 30. So nice to see some of those little stats. But then, of course, later you've got Thomas Bryant that right after the game was over, the Wizards and Suns game were coming down into the end of the game into overtime, and you saw that Thomas Bryant had 17 points. He was, I think it was like 7 or 8 shots. I think it was eight or 9 shots, 8 of 8 or 9 of 9, something like that.
Right.
Right. As soon as the game ended, and you're just like, all right, so I turned the game on just to see how he was doing, and he just kept scoring. He kept scoring, and I think one of the biggest keys was in this was that he was doing this in in overtime at the end of the game, in first overtime, double overtime, triple overtime, when the minutes actually mattered. The big stage, the big moment didn't faze him at all. And it wasn't just his shooting, how he scored 31 points, 14 of 14 from the field. He got 13 rebounds. He also, his defense was also incredible by the end of the game. He was blocking shots, cutting drivers off. He was also getting them to miss a lot of shots to where the Wizards could actually pull it out. So he was a key. He played an enormous role for the Wizards trying to pull it out at the end when they had both Otto and John Wall injured. And it was just literally, it was Thomas Bryant and Bradley Beal winning in an NBA game by themselves. But and another part, just to keep talking about Thomas's night, just to keep talking about how incredible it was, like Matt said, since I watched the Wizards, but Thomas has the entire season has gotten most of his points off of John Wall, because last night, as Nithin and I talked about, I mentioned how John Wall loves those athletic centers, so he likes to lob it or pass it or do something to Thomas, and that's how Thomas has gotten most of his points this year. John Wall was injured. He was sick last night. He didn't play yet. Thomas was still able to go 14 of 14. Everyone found him. His energy was incredible, and it was just probably a night that Thomas won't ever forget. But Nithin, since Matt and I have now both talked for forever, do you have any thoughts on either of those two amazing days and amazing nights for both of those players?
Yeah, no, it's all good, guys. I mean, the funny thing with Bryant is, he was going up. I mean, I don't know how frequently this guy was guarding him, but he was going up against the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft, DeAndre Ayton, and he was matching him shot for shot, rebound for rebound, and it's a friendly reminder. It feels like, because we followed Thomas Bryant since his college days, that he's a wily NBA veteran now. That's not true. He's only 21 years old, and it's in any other era he would be a junior or a senior in college right now. Instead, he's in his second year in the NBA, and he's just in the process of getting better and trying to find his right fit, and it looks like he's found a home with Washington. At least that's the way the last few games have played out.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, for more prolonged success would be good for Thomas. I think obviously getting the opportunity now to start for the Wizards is good for him, but he needs to keep this up, because it's the NBA and things can change in a hurry. So he needs to definitely get back in the gym and make sure he's keeping his body healthy.
Yeah, and at least for his for his standpoint, he does have more than a few games to at least show that he can keep doing it and make sure that he can stay on a roster, whether or not he actually leaves the Wizards even at the end of the season, or just whatever his future is. But he's got a few more games to continue to even have half of what he did on Saturday evening, when, like I said last week, Dwight Howard's injured. He was out 2 to 3 months. So right about now, it's about 1 to 2 months or so when the Wizards are expecting Dwight Howard to come back, which is who Thomas replaced. So that's obviously a fair amount of games that Thomas Bryant is going to step up and continue in the starting role, because ever since Dwight went out, the Wizards there hasn't been one game where they haven't been comfortable in putting Thomas in the starting lineup. So Thomas just needs to continue what he's doing, start getting more minutes, because he's only been playing about 20 or so minutes per game, not including the overtime extra minutes last night, but just get more of his minutes up, continue scoring, be efficient, and just keep a head up. But let's go into the main body of our episode this week, which is going to be, like I said, a reader mailbag. So all of you guys submitted questions. It's going to be kind of just a random spurt of questions between mostly IU basketball, but we have a couple other sports that are thrown in here and there. But Nithin and I had the questions we went at the end of last week's show. We didn't get to talk about a couple of them too much because we thought they were great questions and we were just strapped for time. So we thought we'd bring them back to this week because then we'd also have Matt and we can talk a little bit more about these questions because I thought this was just an incredible question. And Matt listened, but he hasn't been able to comment on this question. But Frame by Frame Hoops, again, just from last week, said Samson James or Jack Tuttle more important for Indiana football next year? And since Nithin and I briefly talked about this last week, let's shoot it over to Matt first to get what his opinions are for this specific question.
So I've been thinking about this for a little bit now. Jack Tuttle is pretty important, of course. He's a 4-star quarterback from California. Of course, he went to Utah, and now he's transferring to IU. So obviously, the quarterback situation I use, a little bit up in the air. Of course, you got Ramsey, who's been the starter the last 2 years, still there. We have Mike Penix, who's shown a lot of promise. So with those three quarterbacks in the quarterback room, I think we're pretty set. And I thought we were pretty set on quarterback even before Tuttle showed up. So my vote has to go to Samson James. Because if you look on this roster, for the last 2 years, we've been really doing running back by committee other than he who shall not be named because he got kicked out of IU for sexual assault, Morgan Ellison. I think now we have a Big Ten caliber running back. And if you look back through the history of IU and IU's offense, especially when it comes to football, we're talking about football, so duh when it comes to football. But anyways, so especially with IU, we do a lot better when we have a Big Ten caliber running back. So you look back, Tevin Coleman. Sure, we didn't do as well, but without Tevin Coleman, we were absolutely nowhere on that team. And then you look at the 2015-16 team with Jordan Howard, Big Ten caliber running back. We get to a bowl game. So definitely looking at IU's offense to be much better next year with a running back that can compete in between the tackles, but also can, has the speed to outrun perimeter defenders. Having a Big Ten running back is really something that you need, especially in the Big Ten. So a Big Ten caliber back is way more important than the quarterback, but only because I feel like the quarterback room was already good before this, and now it's great, but it's just kind of like adding an extra piece of it's like an extra toy, whereas we really needed a really good running back, and now we really have a good running back, and that fills a need that we have that is a lot more demanding.
Of course, you also have Stevie Scott, which that helps to fill that role.
But the thing with Stevie is I don't see Stevie projecting as a 4-down back. I can see Stevie coming in and giving you 2 or 3 downs, especially when you need to get 2 or 3 yards, as a 3rd down back. But I see Samson James as a 4-down back, somebody that can be a 4-year starter at IU. And so he fills a need that we desperately need on offense, which is running through the balls through the tackles and then breaking to the second level. Because Stevie can run through the tackles with the best of them, but he's going to get tackled by the first defender, or he's going to run him over and get tackled by the second one. Samson James can make people miss. He can break those big runs. And with IU, we really need big plays and big runs especially, and Samson James can bring that better than Stevie can.
Gotcha. Okay, so Nithin, why don't I shift it over to you? What were your thoughts about that, and then maybe also comment maybe more what it means for IU in terms of recruiting specifically?
Yes, first of all, both guys are incredibly intriguing, and
right,
it's rare.
Correct.
It's rare to see sort of one 4-star running back who has had offers from all your major college football blue bloods like Ohio State and Michigan State and Georgia. That's one guy. And then the other guy's a 4-star quarterback who, is from California. He's sort of in that Nate Sudfeld build. And everyone is praising, heaping praise on top of this guy, left, right, and center. Something interesting will be seeing what the eligibility status of Jack Tuttle actually is, even as early as 2019 is concerned. It's something that Tom Allen said as recently as a few days ago is sort of still under appeal. There's a waiver appeal process that they're going through right now with the NCAA. And if he's eligible starting next year, it'll be interesting to see how that sort of shifts the entire thing. Personally, this is tough. I would agree with Matt on this one. I think even though Stevie Scott is in that running back room, it's just rare to see a guy, especially an in-state guy, with this many high-profile offers who chose to come to IU. And it seems like he fits really well with this coaching staff and the game plan. It's going to be fun to see a few more seats filled at Memorial Stadium just so they can watch Samson James play. Part of my thought process here is that I do believe in Michael Penix as a long-term solution to IU's quarterback position. If for whatever reason he can't end up being the player I think he can be, which is sort of a dynamic dual-threat quarterback, even coming off of his knee injury, then it's nice that we have Tuttle. But, Samson James, I think, will get playing time from day one, even though that's something Tom Allen has yet to commit to immediately.
Yeah, I like it. Let's go on to the next question that we briefly talked about. So, Matt, I'll kick it over to you again since you didn't get to comment. But Mike from Twitter, if they return, what kind of impact can Race Thompson and Jerome Hunter realistically have on this season? And if they don't return, how does that impact IU's ceiling, if at all, any?
So Jerome and Race are two very important people on this team, surprisingly. Yes, we haven't seen Jerome really play that much. If not at all, but he's actually really important to this team, and here's why. Jerome himself is a shooter, and that's what this team lacks drastically, is three-point shooting, still, and confident three-point shooting, because a lot of the guys out there, so look at your Mick Roberts, you look at your Evan Fitzner's, have been kind of shy to shoot the three. Or shyer than they should be, really. And looking back through tape on high school, Jerome Hunter's not afraid to shoot the three. He's a decent three-point shooter, and he's a fantastic perimeter defender. So he's somebody along the lines of, he's not Zach McRoberts because he's a lot taller, he's a lot bigger, and he's a lot more athletic. But he's along the lines of somebody we could put in, and he's going to play lockdown defense, and he's more than useful on the offensive end. And so that's something that he brings, and obviously more bodies makes the team a lot better. And then Race Thompson is a lot like, he's more of in the Juwan Morgan role. He doesn't have Juwan Morgan's vision or passing, but he's a three-point threat, and he can bang with the big guys down low. And so instead of maybe playing Evan Fitzner down there, we can play somebody along the lines of Race Thompson, who's 6'8" and also has a lot of muscle and is strong. His legs are stronger than Evan's are, and so he can deal with a post threat defensively a lot better than somebody like Evan can, and that keeps Evan out of foul trouble and keeps Evan on the 3-point line, which is where we need him, not on the block down low. So that's what they both bring. And then, like I said with Jerome, more bodies is much better for the team. First off, it gets people's rest, so later in games, people are more fresh. But then second off, if somebody's having an off night, you can play somebody else more minutes to, who might be playing better offensively. So if Mick Roberts isn't shooting the ball, you could put Jerome in, who's going to shoot the ball if we need shooting. Or if, let's say, Juwan gets into foul trouble early, we can play somebody like Race Thompson, who plays very similar to Juwan Morgan, and so we don't lose that type of a player. Not saying that Jerome and Race are the same caliber player, but they're the same type of player, and so defenses still have to account for a big guy that can step out and shoot the three. So that's what we're missing in those two guys.
Yeah. Any extra comments, Nithin?
Yeah, I liked your point, Matt, just about having additional depth, and this guy would absolutely sort of change the dynamic there. Jerome Hunter, and I've said this before, he's no slouch. I mean, this is a guy who is
Right.
Rated. I mean, look, we can only go by recruiting rankings right now. They're not a be-all, end-all, but this is a guy who is ranked higher than Robert Finney, the point guard that we've all grown to love here. Over this non-conference season,
right?
And, imagine someone who can make Robert Finney's kind of impact in the front court, and this is someone who can really sort of change the game for IU if all the high school scouting reports are to be believed. Of course,
Right.
When a guy actually starts playing, anything can happen. But what this means, I think, is if Hunter comes back, all of a sudden now everyone's responsibilities are lessened just a little bit, and you're a little bit fresher for March and hopefully April when the games are for real. But there's a long way to go, and hopefully we can get both Hunter and Thompson back at full strength sooner than later.
True.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think Race will be more likely to come back, especially because his redshirt eligibility, which we're going to talk about later, is definitely a little more different than Jerome. And Jerome's condition also looks like it might not be, it might not work out for this season, but we'll have to continue to see. And if he were to come back, we also do have to try and remember, sometimes we forget about this, is that really it's only been Juwan and Romeo that have won the gold jerseys in practice. But Jerome Hunter did win that one however many months ago in between Juwan and Romeo winning that stuff. So he's been a guy that just not only has been working hard in practice, but has shown that he's been able to do a bunch of stuff on at least the practice court. But let's move on to some of our newer questions. So Sud from our email list, and again, if you'd like to try and check out our email list, go to indianahq.com, our website. Just click the subscribe button. All you got to do is put your email in. You can get a weekly update on all of the Indiana HQ articles and just everything we're putting out. Just get it all kind of summarized in one email. Just comes once a week, so it doesn't flood your email box that much. Just a great way for another way to stay in contact with us. You can also email us back that way. And then if you also forget to go on the site and you like to read some of our stuff, that's another way just to remember that, hey, then I got an email in my box, because I know sometimes even I forget to check out some stuff when I just have a busy week. But from the email list, Evan Fitzner played 18 minutes versus Marquette, 2 minutes versus Louisville, 8 minutes versus Butler. Basically, what's the issue regarding his fit into Archie's system? Let's kick it over to Nithin first.
Yeah, so I've always been, even back to the start of the season, I've always thought Fitzner was going to play a key role on this team, but given that he was a graduate transfer, and given that there are some new pieces that Archie Miller has at his disposal, I felt like there was going to be an adjustment period. I still expect Fitzner to be a difference maker once the conference season starts, which is, in about 10 days' time. But when a guy is kind of a, what do they call, like a stretch four, a perimeter shooting forward, there are going to be games where you look like the best player on the team, and there are going to be games where you're struggling. And in those games where he struggles, well, fortunately, IU has the depth right now with guys like Juwan Morgan and Duron Davis and Justin Smith, where you don't have to force Fitzner out there when he's not having his A game. So, I think you saw back against Marquette and against Duke, even to some extent, when Fitzner is playing well, Archie Miller does like to keep him out on the floor. But if he's struggling, it's, hey, look, we have other options. But I do expect Fitzner to be an X factor when conference season starts.
What do you think, Matt?
I think I agree with everything Nithin just said. I think for me, it has to do a lot more with matchups. So if Duron is better on a bigger big guy, then he's going to play Duron over Evan, because Evan's not going to be able to play defense against him. And I think a lot with Archie is how much he can trust Evan defensively, Because if he can't trust Evan at all defensively, he's not going to play him that much. Like, of course, he's still going to play him a little bit because of what he brings offensively, but he's not going to give him major minutes unless he can trust him defensively against whatever the matchup is. So it's really matchup dependent.
Yeah, and I also think he is in a little bit of a slump because he has had at least the past couple of games when he was in his the longest stretch of his slump, which I guess you could still say that he's in there now, but against especially Louisville and Butler, some of those big time games, I think it was more matchup dependent, but now I also think he's in. You can also have a bad stretch of games. Remember, Justin Smith, at least offensively, is just starting to get out of his slump. So you can have a bad stretch of games. I think that also contributes to a lot of it, and he's also just got to get his confidence back. We talked about that with Justin Smith. Everyone's kind of talked about that with just him getting his confidence back. I think Evan just needs to start hitting some more shots because even against Jacksonville the other night, you got 13 minutes. He was 1 of 3 from the field, which is only 1-2. He missed both of his threes, and that's kind of what gets his confidence going. So he just kind of needs to get back into it, start getting some time when he can, and just make the most of the few minutes as he gets, because I think he's going to start to get less minutes compared to more minutes, at least at the beginning of conference play, since he just hasn't shown that he can play just yet. But let's go on to our next question. Phil from Twitter, is Jake Forrester a project or a disappointment? Seems like a great kid from a distance. Why no court time? And first he and Freddie talked about this when we talked to him on our podcast, and he just talked about he's just not ready yet. Archie doesn't put these players in if they're not ready, so I just don't think he's ready yet. And I don't necessarily think he's a disappointment because first, you can't really judge almost any player off of their first half of their first season, especially when they're not a highly ranked recruit. If we did that for someone like even Victor Oladipo and OG Anunoby, we would have thought, oh man, these guys are just going to be a disappointment. Yeah, and then they go from just not being ranked at all to being where you got Vic and being one of the best players in the entire NBA. So you definitely just got to give them more time. Another current player like that, Juwan didn't necessarily start out quite like Jake did, but Juwan Morgan didn't get to his potential All-American caliber self until right after his sophomore year. No one ever thought that Juwan Morgan, right after his sophomore year a couple years ago, that he would be this crucial to this team. He'd be getting the second triple-double in IU history and getting it deservingly. So that's why he has no court time. He's just not ready yet. He's just not showing it in practice, despite the amount of injuries that he's got, which is also nice that we really did ask Freddie basically this exact question. And a project, definitely I think a project, easily a 4-year kind of guy that's got potential. And you've seen that flashes of potential, but he's just a freshman. So, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would teach patience on this fact, and I even teach patience when it comes to Clifton Moore, because we can talk about this with Clifton a lot more than we could talk about this with Jake. But
yep.
I feel like the more they're in the program, the better they're going to get. And you have to trust in the coach's ability to make them better. 4 years is a long time for a basketball player. Not everybody is Romeo Langford coming in, right? Not everybody's a one and done. Not everybody's Noah Vonleh.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to come in and just be ready to play college basketball on day one. They might have been a great high school basketball player, but that's going to do nothing for them when you're going against grown men playing basketball. So when it comes to Jake, I'm sure he's shown glimpses of what he can be in practice, and he's even shown us a little bit in garbage time. But when it comes into a big game, I mean, he's not going to be able to compete physically, or he's not going to be prepared mentally for those games. And so we have to give him a year, and then I'm sure next year he'll play a little bit more, and then his junior year he'll play even more than that, and then his senior year he'll be a great fourth-year senior starter. So you just have to give that patience. Now, I'm going to go off the question here a little bit, but I mentioned Clifton Moore. Now, if Clifton Moore is getting the same amount of minutes that he's getting this year next year, then I think we have this question and this discussion with Clifton Moore. Because if you look at who Archie's recruiting, and you look who he's bringing in, and you look at the people he's brought in, right, and Clifton's not getting the game time, then maybe we go, maybe this guy wasn't right for IU, maybe this wasn't the right fit. but you got to give it patience. It's a 4-year career. He's in his freshman year, and it's not often that freshmen get a ton of playing time, especially in the really good programs and what we're trying to become. You look at Villanova, right? And Villanova's having a hard time this year because they're having to play freshmen. Usually Villanova's got a 4-year starter, and then a 3-year starter, and a 2-year starter, and then a 4-year starter, and everybody's trying to copy Villanova. Or you look at Kansas, and Kansas got seniors all over the place, and maybe a couple 5-star freshmen like we've got, but their main stars on Kansas are seniors. You look at LaGerald Vick, you look at Dedrick Lawson. So I think it's unfair to look at somebody who's a freshman and wasn't a very heralded recruit at that and go, is he a disappointment or not? I think I would have some patience with him and give him some time to grow.
Exactly. 100% agree. Any extra things, Nithin?
Yeah, I think to directly answer the question, I think the answer is he's more of a project. I think it would be hard to call him a disappointment. I think he's a project. I mean, I think unless you're Romeo, for every Romeo Langford, there are 1,000 Jake Forresters, where you were your superstar in high school, but there's a major adjustment process at the college level, and I think that's what Forrester is going through. I think he's more than capable of being a good college basketball player down the road. But right now, I mean, who are you going to give him minutes over? Are you going to bench Juwan Morgan or Justin Smith or Deron Davis or Evan Fitzner, who's in his final year of eligibility? No, I don't think you're going to. But down the road, I bet you'll see Forrester play more often.
I mean, yeah, just look at Jake Forrester's recruiting ranking, right? Like when you're looking at recruiting rankings, you go, the top 20 guys are probably going to be NBA lottery picks, or should be if they're ranking them right. And the 20 through 50 are going to be great 1 to 2 year college players, and then 50 to 100 is 3 to 4 year guys that can become stars, and then 100 to 200, there's just a bunch of guys that are toss-ups. They're projects, right? These are guys that could be fantastic on day one, and they've misranked them in the case of Robert Finney, or they're guys that could sit there forever and not get any game time, like the Tim Prillers of the world. So you have to trust the coaching staff is going to do an excellent job in developing Jake, and I promise that they will. But as of now, he can't be a disappointment because he's only been here 1 year. So just give it time. Some patience is needed with Jake, definitely. And
not even a year. It's only been half a year.
Right.
But he's got a great attitude, great energy, and that's what you can ask out. That's all you can ask out of a freshman that's not a Romeo Langford kind of caliber. So
right. And
we'll just continue to see what he does.
And the most that we can ask from him right now is for him to be game ready. If he's able to come in a game, maybe when everybody's in some foul trouble, and give us some good minutes, kind of in the way that Tim Priller did against Purdue last year, right? He comes in and gives us 10 to 15 minutes off the bench in a situation we need from him. That is all we can ask from him this year. That would be perfect. So look for that more down the road to see if Archie trusts him to go in and give the team a boost.
Yeah. Exactly. But let's go on to our next question from Frame by Frame Hoops. Again, this is a very long question, so I'm really just going to give one of these answers to each of us, basically, and we're just going to chat about it for a quick second. But so for women's basketball, men's basketball, football, baseball, volleyball, and soccer, what's on your holiday wish list for them? So being in the holiday season, what would be on our holiday wish list? So let's start with the way the question was framed. Let's start with women's basketball, and let's shoot it over to Nithin. What would be on your holiday wish list for women's basketball?
Yeah, it's been a good start for that team. They lost a game over a few days ago in Puerto Rico, but overall, they had lost Tyra Buss to graduation among a few other seniors, and I think there were some question marks going into the season. They've done a good job. I think they went 11-1 through the non-conference schedule, which I think Coach Terry Moran will take every day of the week. As far as a holiday wish list is concerned, I guess, dear Santa, hopefully this success can carry over into Big Ten play.
Yeah, exactly. And then to where that success can be it to where they can almost close to possibly be ranked. But Matt, how about you go over to men's basketball? What's on your holiday wish list for Archie and this Hoosier basketball team?
I got two things. The first thing I have on my wish list is that we get the commitment of Keon Brooks and finish up the recruiting class for next year, which would lead to a special year next year, definitely. But then the second thing is to get healthy. I want everybody to go home, have some nice home-cooked meals, and come back and everybody's able to play. In a dream world, I hope that, Jerome Hunter gets over his leg injury and we finally get to see him play against Illinois. So definitely health of the team and continued health of the team is definitely what I want on our Christmas list.
I'll take football next. Of course, the football team, their on the field play did not necessarily end the way we might have wanted it to be, but I think at least Tom Allen has been having a great offseason thus far. But to add it to the holiday wish list, I think it's as simple as just getting David Bell as a recruit, and I think that's about it. If you can get David Bell, which I think, I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on it, but I think that would be the highest rated recruit IU football has ever gotten. It would be a huge in-state get. Just get David Bell, and I think that would basically put the cherry on top for the football program. But let's put it over back to Matt. What about baseball?
Baseball, some continued success. I think the baseball program has been one of the more successful sports programs at IU since I've been there, and I think continued success and continued improvement in the baseball program would be fantastic. Maybe even making it back to the NCAA tournament. The baseball tournament would be nice, and maybe even a Big Ten title. So I'm looking at that for the baseball team for our Christmas list.
I'll take volleyball next, since I have relatively followed volleyball, and that just means relatively. But volleyball wish list. This is out of all of these sports that were mentioned, I think this is the specific program that is in the farthest. I don't want to say farthest down, like worst program. I think they're just more in a rebuilding mode than all of the other ones are, and that's what Coach Steve Aird was brought to do. So, and he's already really, the volleyball recruiting season has kind of come and gone. You're now going to get a couple people here and there, but it's kind of come and gone. This is going to be he'll go into his full second year next year, and I think for my holiday wish list, just for them, is really just some chemistry, because they've got a lot of great recruits. You've got Evan Fitzner's sister coming in, which is a huge get for the IU volleyball team, especially where they are. And I think this is definitely a program that is going to be on the upswing. They're coming back around. They're coming to where they're going to be able to compete in at least probably even next year the middle of the Big Ten Conference, trying to build up to the top of the conference. But just to get some chemistry, because they're more of a younger team as they try and rebuild. So get some chemistry. But Nithin, why don't you wrap up our holiday wish list for our soccer team?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing on the wish list would be jumping into a time machine and finding a way to go back and beat
yes.
and beat Maryland in the College Cup. But I think going forward, you've got the MLS draft coming up in a couple of weeks. So I hope I know there are a couple of guys who are on the list, guys like Trey Muse, the goalkeeper for IU last season and the last couple of years. I think it's all about getting more Hoosiers into the pro game and having them show out, like a guy like Will Bruin has, for the last few years. So I think that's going to be the number one thing.
I'll even add to that. My holiday wish list item would be that Andrew Gutman gets basically the NCAA soccer equivalent of the National Player of the Year, which he is one of 3 candidates for. Basically, the Heisman of NCAA soccer, which will be announced in about a week or so, and when this podcast is released. So hopefully Andrew wins that award, and that would be also my addition to the holiday wish list. In addition to what could have been the quest for 9. But on to another question from Phil. What is the status of Jerome Hunter? Should we redshirt ? Race ? McRoberts ? So kind of basically an injury question talking about Jerome Hunter. And I don't know if you guys know anything else more about Jerome Hunter, but like we've talked about more on previous podcasts, Jerome is a guy that we don't know specifically what kind of injury he has. I don't think we really need to know specifically. That's it. To be blatant, it's none of our business. But I would probably lean more towards Jerome Hunter not coming this season. Let's just talk about the status of Jerome Hunter first before we talk about redshirting. So, either of you have any comments on Jerome Hunter's status?
Yeah. So as far as with Hunter, it's like right now the most recent update is that he's out indefinitely, and no one really knows. Obviously, it's a vague word as it is, but I think something to keep in mind, and I think Noah, you touched on this earlier. The red shirt rules are slightly different in Hunter's case than it is with Race Thompson. So for those of you that may not know, as far as amateur athletics go, you basically get 5 years to play for. Now, if you're a guy like Romeo Langford, you're not going to use those 4 or 5 years. But, Jerome Hunter, this is obviously his first season. If he decided to take a red shirt, which means he doesn't play this year, he can start his eligibility clock, as they say, next season. He can play up to 4 years starting next year. Race Thompson, who I know we wanted to focus on just Jerome Hunter, but Race Thompson was on the IU basketball team last year and took his red shirt last season. So he unfortunately can't burn another year. His eligibility clock started this season. So for that reason, there's, I think, a little bit more urgency to get Race Thompson on the basketball floor. But look, Jerome Hunter obviously is a highly touted player coming in. If he's good to go once he's healed from his surgery, then I think Archie Miller would like to see him on the court. But it seems to be a difficult situation at the moment.
The only thing I would add to that, there is a slight chance, and this is not to get anyone's hopes up or anything, but you can at the end of the season, so say Race's concussion is just so bad that he really isn't able to come back the entire season. He is able to, at the end of his, what would now be 5 years, he is able to write a letter to the NCAA requesting for that extra year for that medical reason, because of course he wasn't anticipating that. And in some cases, the NCAA will grant him that extra year. That's not, of course, first of all, that's something that's very rare in the first place. Mm-hmm. But then let alone the NCAA saying yes, but that is a case that could potentially happen. Mm-hmm. But he's played 3 minutes officially. And again, going into more of, because we're also going to talk about Zach McRoberts with the red shirt stuff. Now, again, you could write that letter to the NCAA to see if that counts. You have to play, I don't remember, is it 20 or 25%? You have to play under that amount of minutes throughout the entire season for that medical red shirt to count. So that could potentially count for Zach McRoberts. But Matt, do you have anything about Jerome, Race, or Zach in terms of injuries and red shirts?
Yeah, I don't think Zach McRoberts is going to be available to redshirt at all. He's played too many minutes this year for that to even be a possibility. And I think he's a fifth-year senior at this point, so I think that's off the table for him. So just getting him healthy and getting him back to play as many minutes as he possibly can in an IU uniform would be perfect. As far as Jerome Hunter, I think even if he gets healthy, I think the experience that he's going to learn from going up against Romeo in practice is going to be enough. I don't think risking him during real life game time and maybe even risking a year of his eligibility is worth it for him to play, less than half a year, and he's already behind the 8 ball when it comes to being in game shape and, his form and whatnot. So I would definitely, at this point, if it goes on for another couple weeks, another 2 or 3 weeks, look at redshirting him.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and this all of this talk goes into our next question from Dustin. How much trouble is IU in with all of the injuries they've sustained leading up to the conference season? So I'll kick it back over to you, Matt. How much trouble is IU with all the injuries that they've sustained?
I wouldn't say major trouble, but I also would say that they're obviously not in the best of shape. Especially when it comes to basketball team, a lot of the chemistry comes down to playing with each other in practice, and the fact that we haven't had these guys healthy and they probably can't play in practice has actually really hurt the team. But being able to get them back, hopefully, like the likes of Robert Finney and Race Thompson will be back in practice after the Christmas break. So being able to get those couple of days of like really good, hard practicing before the Illinois game, we should be in fine shape. But if they're unable to practice, then I would be a little bit more worried than I am right now.
Yeah. And that kind of goes into, I loved your comment about the just the practice and getting all the chemistry and stuff. I think that's also a little bit of the reason why Archie probably had the starters in a little longer than people. There was 8 minutes left and we were still up by over 30 against Jacksonville. At that point, you might as well even have some of those backups come in, but almost everyone on the floor were starters. So I think it was just getting as much game time as possible for everyone that's been able to play, being able to play with each other since they haven't been able to play with each other. So,
right.
Nithin, what about you?
Yeah, I think it kind of caught my attention earlier today. I was just looking at some numbers, and I was surprised to see that only one IU player this year is averaging over 30 minutes a game. It's Romeo Langford. Everyone else is under that threshold, and I think that's a pretty well done job by Archie Miller of just saving his guys' stamina for when the games really pick up in terms of intensity. For some reason I was under the impression that with all the injuries, and it seems like IU has like 3 guys out every single game, that every guy was out there playing 30, 35 minutes. That doesn't seem to be the case, which is good to see. Also, something that did catch my attention and would sort of lean me towards it's not that big of a deal is that fortunately, until the Big Ten tournament, IU's not going to have a game this year where they only have 1 day off in between the games. So, every game IU plays until the Big Ten tournament, they're going to have at least 2 days off. Last year, that was not the case. Last year, because of the accelerated Big Ten tournament, they had to sort of cramp the schedule a little bit. That's not what IU has this year, which is another good sign. So, all in all, I think IU's done a good job so far of managing the injury situation. And while you're going into a bit of a gauntlet with conference play, especially with the Big Ten being better this year than it was at least last year, I think they're going to be all right.
I agree. Next question, Rob from Twitter. Which Hoosier in the NFL has the best chance to win a Super Bowl this year? And he also put NBA question mark. So let's. I put down a few of the players that are in playoff contention as of now, since of course the playoff picture going into as we're recording this, basically we're into week 17. The playoff picture is very, very close to being wrapped up, and at least all the people that IU has a team for are they've all gotten a spot in the playoffs, but you've got Jordan Howard with the Bears, you've got Roger Saffold with the Rams, Dan Feeney with the Chargers, you got Simi Cobbs and Shane Wynn with the Saints, and then Robert McCray, who is on the practice squad of the Chiefs. So out of those 5 teams, Nithin, and I guess it's kind of more, this would be more of an NFL talk because except for and even the Bears, which is Nithin's team, so of course Nithin's going to want the Bears to continue. But almost all of these teams are basically right now the top of the playoff contention too. So I think for
hey, don't forget Nate Sudfeld with the Eagles. That's all I'm saying. Don't count us out that quickly yet. Come on now.
But for best chance,
I'm telling you, don't count out Nick Foles, okay? And Nate Sudfeld,
all right.
The dynamic duo. All right.
Just for Matt's ease, we'll put the Eagles in there.
Thank you.
Even though they aren't even in the playoffs right now, if the season were to end today. But Nithin, Which team? So basically, it's which team do you think is going to win the Super Bowl? Because IU's got someone on almost every team that has a very good shot of winning.
Yeah, I'm gonna toot Jordan Howard's horn, baby. I think the Bears are gonna show America that defense matters in 2018 and 2019, and they're gonna suffocate the Eagles or the Vikings, whoever dares to come to Soldier Field, and then they're gonna march on to Southern California and put the Rams out of their existence, and then they'll steamroll the Saints in New Orleans, and we'll see them in Atlanta. A lot thanks to Jordan Howard, who's going to plow in for touchdowns inside the 5-yard line on a week-by-week basis. So it's going to be the Bears and Jordan Howard, and I can't wait to see that happen.
See, I'm going to have to disagree with you. Because
Unbelievable.
I know. I know, and I'm not going to say the Eagles because that's the homer pick, and we're not even in the playoffs yet. But after the Seahawks lose tonight, and then one of either the Seahawks or the Saints lose next week. I mean, not Seahawks. Seahawks and Vikings lose next week. Sorry, I had a Freudian slip. But anyways, the Saints are my pick. I think Simi Cobbs and what's the other guy for the Saints? I can't remember his name. Shane Wynn. Yeah, I think they have the best shot at winning the Super Bowl. I think they're the most complete team. Drew Brees is in the form of his life right now. He's having one of his best seasons ever. They actually have a running game. And their defense is actually decent, and then they also probably have home field advantage for the entire playoffs in the Superdome. So I'm gonna go with the Saints as my pick.
Until they face the Bears.
No.
Nithin, you talked about defense, and I'm not sure how these statistics will go up against after the Pittsburgh game, because Pittsburgh scored on the Saints defense more than the Saints defense had let the past six games. But it was a statistic going into the Pittsburgh game that the Saints defense was number one in points scored, number one in rush defense, and number one in something else that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But just something of the Saints defense being incredible. Plus, they have one of the best home field advantages in the entire NFL. I'm going to have to go with the Saints, even though Simi and Shane probably won't officially contribute. If you want to go with a specific player that would contribute the most, so say you alter the question to which player is also going to have on the field impact to win a Super Bowl, I'd probably have to go with Roger Saffold for the Rams. I think they'd be my next team, or maybe Dan Feeney on the Chargers.
Well, I was about to say you were giving the short end of the stick to Dan Feeney. Those Chargers are looking really good right now as well.
I said and yes, most of these are the NFC teams, but yeah, I think the Chargers out of the other side, unless you want to throw Robert with the Chiefs, I think the Chargers have a very good chance coming out of the AFC. Since the AFC, you've got Pittsburgh and New England, usually the two teams that get on to the Super Bowl recently are struggling a little more than normal. So I think the field is wide open for the AFC if you want throwing Dan Feeney in there to win as well. Let's go to the NBA, and really, when you think about it, of course, IU has a bunch of players that are at the NBA level, but a lot of them aren't really on a team that could really compete for the an NBA Finals victory. I think really first, because then you've got the Kings with Yogi and Troy. I guess half Troy since he goes up and down, but I don't think the Kings even have a shot at winning, even if they're in playoff contention at the moment. But almost the same thing with the Thomas Bryant and the Wizards. I think the Wizards, when they just fix the slump that they've been in since the beginning of the season, if they get into the playoffs, I don't think they'd be able to get past. Even if they got to the conference finals, I don't think they'd be able to get past.
There's only one
State.
choice. There's only one choice for the NBA.
I'm getting there. There. And then you've got Victor Oladipo with the Pacers, who have been doing really good. Of course, I just don't. And I think we're all going to upset Pacers fans. I just don't think the Pacers necessarily. When you think about the Pacers going up against Golden State, especially when Boogie gets to come back, when it's all said and done, and just the West of who the West is, I don't know if the Pacers have the best shot. So I think this is more of an obvious answer. I think OG with the Raptors has the best shot. But Matt, what are your thoughts?
Wait, you're telling me that Noah Vonleh with the Knicks doesn't have a shot at the NBA championship? Come on now. You're giving the short end of the stick to the Knicks here because they're gonna get Porzingis back and then they're gonna trade for Kevin Durant mid-season and they're gonna win the title. I almost said the national title. I feel like the Knicks. I feel like the Knicks would have a hard time winning the national title with the squad that they have at this point, anyways. But that's besides the point.
You also forgot about Anthony Davis too.
Oh yes, that's right. Yes, they're going to trade for Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, and the Warriors are just going to add Draymond Green in the deal too because they're feeling nice, and then Noah Vonleh is going to get his ring.
There you go.
But no, it's definitely OG with the Raptors. That team is been surprisingly better than I thought they'd be. Who knew that adding a top 3 player in the NBA would make your team really good? But we could definitely talk about that more if you would ask us more questions about the NBA. But OG's definitely got the best chance. Is he going to win it? No, the Warriors are going to win this year once they get Boogie back. But I mean, OG might be in the finals. So
yeah, no, I was going to say, to sort of summarize, I think the Raptors with Anunoby are the team more likely to make the finals and kind of go deeper, but Oladipo's probably the IU player that'll contribute the most individually to any sort of playoff run.
Right, absolutely. Though OG did have a nice career high the other night at 23 and was killing
you're
it.
right, he did. Yeah,
I should have added that
impressive
to my memorable monologue. My bad, I'm sorry, OG. That was like 2 nights ago. So IU basketball players are killing it right now.
Yeah, they are. Which leads into our last question, which is kind of fitting for the end of the episode. John, on our email list, what end of the season would be considered a success for Archie Miller? So just to reword that, basically what would be a success for Archie Miller when it's all said and done at the end of the season? Nithin, why don't you start us off?
This is an interesting question. I really like this question because I think if you asked 100 IU fans, they'd all have slightly different answers. First, I guess first things first. You can't lose to Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament.
There you go.
I think you definitely need. I think you kind of need a Saturday, at least a semifinal appearance in the Big Ten tournament. Always, that stuff can always be a little bit weird, but this year the tournament's in Chicago, and hopefully IU can have a better showing there. I think a semifinal run in the Big Ten tournament. And as far as the NCAA tournament goes, it's so hard to predict because so much of it depends on who you play in the first round and then who wins and who loses. But, I think it would be a success this year if IU made it to the second weekend, the Sweet 16. I think everything after that would be cherry on top.
Well, I'll give you a situation. What if we don't make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, but we win the Big Ten tournament?
No, I think. Look, it depends on who you play in the NCAA tournament, but I think that matters a little bit more.
Okay. But, we've never won a Big Ten tournament, so winning the Big Ten tournament would be a big deal for me.
I was about to say, yeah. I was about to say, when you think of no one winning the Big Ten tournament, you would go back to Bob Knight and him not even winning a Big Ten tournament. So I think any season, any coach ever, it would be a success to win the Big Ten tournament. But yeah, Matt, what were we going to say?
Yeah, I was going to agree with you that any season in which we win the Big Ten tournament is a success because it's kind of embarrassing if we're supposed to be the marquee basketball school in the Big Ten and we haven't won a Big Ten tournament in our history. So we should probably get around to that at some point. But yeah, I would also agree that the reasonable expectation for what would be a good season would be reaching the second weekend of the Big Ten of the Big Ten tournament, reaching the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, getting to the Sweet 16. Anything beyond that is like icing on the cake. But getting to the Sweet 16 again in Archie's second year would be just what the program needs.
And I would even take it back just a little bit because I think you can still have a successful season even if it wasn't what you guys might have wanted. So like, for example, getting to the second weekend, of course, like you guys would be great, but I think I don't think we have to get to the second weekend for that to be considered a success for Archie Miller. I think more of like a top 4, top 3 finish in the Big Ten, not getting knocked out early in the Big Ten tournament, and even then making it to the NCAA tournament. Because think when you've got a team that isn't making the NCAA tournament, you've got a new coach coming in. Him getting to the NCAA tournament in his second year is usually a success. Now, of course, you'd want, just with IU normally getting to the tournament, trying to make it into the second weekend as many times as possible, and as many times as they do, you'd want them to try and get to the second weekend. But I think it would be a success even if he just got into the tournament, because he's not taking a step backwards. And if he's not taking a step backwards, then I think that it isn't all that matters, but I think that's a big one of the biggest things that would really matter when it's all said and done. And of course, this is going to be a bumpy ride, but a really good ride for Big Ten play, since the Big Ten is just crazy, and since that's also something to consider, since the Big Ten is just going to be so good this year. Even if they get, I think, a top 5 finish in the Big Ten, that could potentially be a success just by how good everyone is. You never know. But that about wraps it up for our 68th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. I will be back this Friday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. Make sure to stay tuned through updates on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound. Subscribe to us on YouTube or however you listen to podcasts, and visit our website at indianahq.com to find all of our information in one place. As always, send us your questions as the audience, so be sure to comment, chat, or send us a message at admin@indianahq.com on what questions you have, and we'll get them on our next episode. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But, as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.